Hello everyone, Mr. Wheeler from home. And our next project is going to be focusing on jump cuts. And we're going to learn more about the different kinds of cuts, but for this project we're going to focus specifically on the jump cut. So really the jump cut simply is you jump ahead to the next moment of action in your scene. And this can be used in a lot of interesting ways. For the most part, it is used to compress time. So while we are looking at jump cuts today, our overall project is something called time compression, where you are taking a sequence of actions, sequence of preparation, a sequence of events, a sequence of travel, a sequence of time, and you take those moments and you collapse them together into a very short, powerful punch that takes you through the scene very quickly. So let's take a look at an example of what you're going to do. So what you see here is a very basic scene, 45 seconds, simply preparing a cup of coffee. That's the scene. And you'll see this actually quite often in movies. Most particularly, you'll see them in action movies when a character is like getting ready for something, packing for something. So we're going to take a look at a couple examples of this before we continue with how you're going to edit this together. So the first one we're going to take a look at is a scene from Shaun of the Dead.
Player 2 has left the game. You do know the front door was open again last night. I'm not saying it was you.
So what you saw in the scene, it was like, what, 25 seconds? And we see this entire morning, the guy's entire morning, boom, in 25 seconds. Instead of having a camera following him around his house, he's just 25 seconds, and there you go. Here's another example from a very old movie. You saw a lot of these in 80s action movies, and this is one of them. So we're going to see Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime in Commando. And again, you see, all he was doing is just grabbing all of his stuff, equipping, and then boom, he's ready for action. So that's really the heart of what I'm looking for you to do. I did something really simple in my example of just making a cup of coffee. For this project, you're going to edit the scene that I gave you. So I've provided you with a bunch of clips that I filmed of me making coffee, and I want you to do the same thing I did, which is collapse the timeline down from, it takes about 8 minutes to make a pour over coffee, and I made it in 45 seconds. So I'm looking for you to do the same. So let's take a look at how you can do that. I think the easiest way to go about this is to find some good music. And when I was thinking about this project, I thought, okay, if I were to put music to me making coffee, what would that mood be like? And I feel like the mood of Bright was a good example. So I picked Bright for my mood of the music, and then I pick my music from there. Now, once you have your music, it is really easy for you to use that music as a editing guideline, because what you're trying to do here is you are taking these long clips with some action in them, and you are breaking them down into only the most important pieces. So having a piece of music to sync to is really, really helpful. So as usual, you know how to create a project, and we know how to find our video files in the shared folder, as we discussed in the previous assignments. And then you can get all of the video files that you need to edit this down. It's a good idea to go into your video menu on the left-hand side and make it the biggest it can be. So that reveals the video waveform. And for this, you can now use some of the cues for action. Like for example, when I am grabbing something, it will make a sound. So all the empty space between the action can be easily found and edited out. And then once you have those white spaces edited out, that's when you can start lining up your clips to the beats in your audio. And when I say beats, I don't necessarily mean that we're only using electronic music, but all music has beats. And you can see those beats in the waveform of your audio as well. So when you are editing, you should not only be focusing on how the actions are being cut down into their basic elements, but also how well are you connecting those cuts to the beats in the music that you have chosen. So everyone's edit should be a slightly different, because you will use different music and you will line up your cuts according to those beats. That's a good way to go, because it will help you realize how you can get a lot of done with very little in terms of how long your clips need to be. But as long as your audience can actually understand the actions, you're showing enough for the action to be understood, but then you are not lingering too long because you're trying to do a time compression. You will also see me using markers, and you can insert a marker in your timeline by pressing M on your keyboard. And these markers are really helpful when you're using a certain time for your editing. So you'll see, for example, here, what I'm doing is I am finding the bumps in the waveform of the audio to tell me where the new beat kicks in. And then I'm pressing M to put a marker down, and then I'm cutting my video so that I can line it up with those beats. So using markers is another really helpful technique in making sure that you keep track of the points that you want to edit to, and that way you can save yourself a lot of time instead of doing a lot of fiddling. And that's it, everybody. I know this video seems simple, but I think it's actually a lot harder than you might think. It's very difficult to really line up your edits perfectly, and it takes a lot of just watching the same footage over and over and over again. And you really need to think about this kind of like you think of an essay, where you write your first draft and then you read over it and you make some edits, change your sentences a little bit, trim it down perhaps. And that's what we're doing here. Like for example, the first edit of this video from me was 1 minute and 20. But then I took another look through, refined my jump cuts, made sure that everything was queuing up on the beat, and then I dropped down to 45 seconds. So I saved about 35 seconds of footage. Well, I cut 45 seconds of footage out of my video. So I would like for you to do something similar. So I look forward to seeing how you make a cup of coffee. I'll see you soon, everybody.